Yo, welcome back to the weapons terminal. I'm glad to have you along for a look at the corrosive sludge pump for Driller. I'm going to be going over the weapon as a whole and then diving into 5 different builds that I've personally found use for in the time I've had to experiment with them. So, no more waiting. Let's begin already. The corrosive sludge pump, or poop cannon as some like to call it, is first and foremost a blast to use. I don't know, I just like the way it feels to shoot. There's something satisfying about it. As for its place in your armory, the gun sits somewhere between the damage of the flamethrower and the crowd control of the cryo cannon. With the goo's unique status effect of corrosive damage, it manages to melt targets while slowing their advance to a crawl as you fill the cavern with the stuff, letting you divide your attention between many bugs. The corrosive effect is also capable of completely ignoring armor, and nothing is resistant to its effects, so it can deal smooth and consistent damage to enemies that would normally resist temperature-based effects. The goo is great for dealing with armored enemies, dishing out respectable damage even when launched directly at armor plates. Every instance of the goo impact will deal a flat burst of damage, meaning that where you hit something is irrelevant. You simply have to hit it. The goo that doesn't impact creatures leaves puddles behind, giving you a passive way to deal with smaller bugs and larger bugs alike. Puddles act as a separate source of damage from the corrosive effect you're applying with direct hits, meaning the two ticks can stack together if you hit targets in puddles. The damage over time killing things with no further needed attention from you and slowing effect make it even harder for bugs to reach you, and even easier for you and your teammates to get hits in. In addition, any sufficient weapon-based heat source is capable of lighting the goo puddles on fire, helping you deal even more damage over time. Goo puddles can even ignite each other by spreading fire if they're adjacent. It's a versatile tool that I'm finding to be a great addition to my arsenal. One universal tip for all builds too. When you have 1 ammo left in your current tank, try to always charge shot. You lose out on no damage and get the full benefit and spread without spending any more ammo on it. Free damage. Oh, and if you're concerned about the environmental impact the corrosive goo will have on the ecosystems of Hoxie's 4, don't worry. Deep Rock Galactic is pledging to plant 1 tree for every glyphid dissolved by the... I can't do this. Who wrote this? Trees? Really? They're dwarves, Gerald. Why would they even care about Yeah, you know what? Alright, so first, we have a balanced build based around the hydrogen ion additive overclock. It causes greater damage over time and slow effects to any target hit with a direct shot from either your normal or charged shots. Being a clean overclock, this is merely a direct upgrade, letting you spec the cannon out for versatility. These settings are what I would use even if I didn't have an overclock equipped, by the way. My preferred setup is 1, 3, 2, 1, 2 with hydrogen ion additive, you know. I went for high capacity tanks, more goo canisters and potent goo mix for direct damage so I could more efficiently use the direct shot effects of the overclock. In tier 4 I'm using the spillback extension to save ammo and charge shots because there's still plenty fast for your purposes here, but also allows for a few more direct normal shots in between. The tier 5 mod I've used is Fluoroamancer acid. I chose this one to double down on the damage over time effects to quickly eliminate smaller threats with the least attention required from me. This damage also makes the heavy slowing effects more useful since you'll more likely do significant damage without the enemy being able to pursue. I'm currently pairing this with my heavy hitter EPC from my first driller build video. The mods remain untouched with 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, and heavy hitter. This EPC variant serves the purpose of a good single target damage, helping to deal with tougher enemies, and with the added effect of lighting things on fire, which is always nice to pair with corrosive slowdowns. You can also ignite your goo, just letting you know. It's a nice thing to have in your pocket when confronted with particularly threatening enemies that will be dangerous to simply let melt as usual. Playstyle wise, this build is only slightly different from how you would normally be using the sludge pump, like I said. Upon seeing a group of bugs approaching, lead off with a charge shot to give them something to walk through, then start pelting them with singular shots one by one. You want to get as many individual bugs as you can with the direct hits, since that's when the hydrogen ion additive overclock really shines. Prioritizing grunts first, then slashers, guards, and praetorians along the way with any other nasty guys mixed in. Grunts will die from a single direct hit quickly, making it exceptionally good for trash clearing. Anytime you see a decent-sized group approaching, with no puddles beneath, charge shot again, making sure to direct hit them with that as well, since it does a little more damage. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. You have the option of focusing the slowdown effect on anything that concerns you, and letting the corrosive damage effects eliminate anything with a small HP pool. If something's particularly troubling, you always have your EPC to whip out and delete it quickly too. Nice and simple. As for when I'd bring it, this one is balanced, so it should fare decently in any mission as long as you're playing it right. I will say, it does have some particular use on elite threat and lethal enemies warnings, because the slowdown and damage combo lets you prevent the painful front legs of those bugs from reaching you in the first place. The slowdown is enough to even hinder elite enemies, which is no small feat. Our second build is an outlier for the CSP. While the weapon normally relies on damage over time and lingering puddles to deal with enemies, this version focuses on direct damage to melt armor and make their HP sizzle away rapidly. The mods I've chosen on it are 23213 with the Volatile Impact Mixture Overclock. This thing turns the CSP into a heavy-hitting single-target weapon that is still capable of dealing damage over time and slowdown, albeit to a reduced effect. This makes it a powerful suppression tool, very similar to the previous build, only we're trading the slowdown and fast melting for sheer direct hit damage, plus some armor stripping on the side. You'll notice two major changes here, namely in Tier 1 and Tier 5. Tier 1 is using better air pressurizer to deliver your normal shots faster to your chosen target, and Tier 5 is now using Ingredient X to melt armor off anything unlucky enough to be hit. Cool fact about the armor dissolving here. It actually applies to the entire creature when the corrosive damage effect is placed on them from a direct hit. It then chooses a random unbroken armor plate to deal damage to, meaning you can hit them anywhere on their body to achieve the same effect. So fire away no matter what angle you have on the armored bugs. To accompany this gun, I've actually opted to bring something a little different. While any APC variant would be perfectly acceptable, I've decided to bring explosive reload on the Sabata instead. Now I know what you're thinking. The Sabata? Why would you bring the Sabata? Shh, shh, shh. I like it, okay? Okay. Anyway, I spec the pistol out to 32312 with the explosive reload overclock. Normally this variant would suffer from ammo drought quickly, but with your primary already capable of dealing with trash efficiently, your Sabata's freed up to deal quick damage against problem targets. The two guns complement each other. The goo dissolving armor and exposing weak points while the Sabata gets shots in, followed by unavoidable reload damage. Watch for the red marker on enemies' health bars. It'll tell you when the reload is a guaranteed kill. The tactics with this build boil down to pumping damage into targets with speed and using punchy damage to kill quickly. It actually benefits a lot from the Born Ready perk, allowing you to bank multiple explosive mags into one target so long as you don't initiate the reload animation and let it reload in your pocket until you see the kill indicator. The damage over time from your primary will let you see the exact moment the HP drops to the right point for the clean internal explosive kill. Very satisfying. The Impact Mixture Sludge Pump wants to be played in a very similar manner to the first build's version, albeit with less charge shots being thrown out since you'll lose ammo far too quickly. Your regular shots deal 50 damage, and your charge shots deal 70. The only real reason you'd want to use a charge shot is on tightly grouped enemies and maybe if you have a lot of swarmers on the way. Also, bring grenades that can do some area damage to help round things out for you. Neurotoxin grenades and yes, even high explosive grenades can be a huge help and save you a ton of ammo on clumped enemies. Otherwise, have fun using what is essentially a weaponized handheld pressurized cement mixer. Ever wanted to know what it's like to be a shrieking, swollen Mactera whose sole purpose is to fly through the air and expel foul, sticky substance all over hapless enemies? Right? Me too. Now, what if you could have that, but also fire penetrating spheres of superheated plasma through the air? That's this build. Minus the flying part. You'll have to figure that out on your own. I'm using the Goobomber Special Overclock on the CSP this time with the mods 33111. Most of those should make sense. We're trying to maximize puddle size, slowdown, and duration in order to get as much value out of our charge shots as we can here. Oh, speaking of which, if you didn't know, Goobomber Special changes the charge shots to no longer splash outward on impact, and to instead lay a line of puddles in the direction it's fired. These directional lines of goo allow for some precise area control options, causing bugs to collectively get slowed and damaged down its length as they attempt to cross over it, depending on how you're kiting them over. Tier 2 is an interesting choice here, with the atomizer nozzle increasing the range and amount of fragments dropped from charge shots. I have, however, gone for potent goo mix to increase the single shot damage. This is meant to help you with the moment-to-moment enemies that are not in position or not numerous enough to justify a charge shot line of goo, letting you kill your targets same as you would normally when the crowd control isn't necessary. You can go for the longer goo lines if you prefer the increased coverage though. It can be useful, especially on escort. Up to you if you want to switch this around depending on the mission though. If I do, I switch to atomizer nozzle for escort and potent goo mix for salvage and other similar close range missions. The other reason you need normal shot damage is because your secondary is a highly specialized EPC variant utilizing the Overcharger overclock and the Flying Nightmare mod with the config 2123 or 1-1. This increases your charge shot damage, ensuring every Flying Nightmare shot can kill grunts and do respectable damage to anything it passes through, while affording you a bit more ammo. Flying Nightmare synergizes amazingly well with your goo puddle lines. Being able to take advantage of the fact that multiple enemies are now stuck in a straight line, set up perfectly to all take damage from the charge projectile. You can change around the mods a lot on this one, tier 3 especially, since more ammo, greater radius, and greater damage on the charge shot are all good options. Another thing you can change to your liking is how quickly you'd like the charge shot to be ready with the tier 2 mod. Crystal Capacitors is fast, but we use slightly more ammo with 10 per charge, while improved charge shot efficiency is slow with the payoff of 2 ammo save per charge shot, which adds up to a few more uses per full battery. That's for you to decide. The fast charge is simply what I prefer in the heat of the moment. Tactically, this build is a bit strange, requiring you to set up combos with your primary and secondary. You need to know when it's a good time to use charge shots in either gun so as to not empty your reserves too early. Normal shots will do just fine, so don't neglect them as well. When you see a decent sized group approaching, it's time to lay a line of goo. I like to either get to the side and shoot across their path, or make a V shape from your position to catch as many of them approaching you as possible. You can also lay a line straight in the path of big troublemakers like oppressors, delaying the need to deal with them while you get rid of their underlings first. If you see a good number of bugs trapped in a line together, you can switch weapons and send a Flying Nightmare in their direction, eliminating and softening everything in the way. Make sure you're using grenades and axes to help with damage too, it saves you ammo in the long run. I would definitely say you should stick to escort and salvage missions with this build. The two missions where the stationary defense objective gives you ample reason to want to slow a swarm's advance, or choose to delay specific problem enemies such as a bulk detonator. I would also advise you to use this with a team. It can struggle to deal adequate damage when used solo unless you really know what you're doing. Regardless, it's fun as hell once you get the hang of it. Just don't tell the Goobombers if you're bringing it, they get jealous. This next build focuses on the opposite of direct damage, seeking to cover the cave and slowing corrosive goo that can deal with low HP swarms quickly as well as halt the advance of larger threats. This CSP is using a config of 3-2-1-1-1 with a Disperser compound overclock. The fragment count and damage have been increased in exchange for decreased charge shot damage. You won't be needing this though, since the amount of fragments and puddles you can pump out is more than enough to make up for it. Tier 1 and 2 have been chosen to include the atomizer nozzle and air-sensitive compound. These allow for even more fragments and for those that impact the ground to cover a larger area, creating a very cheap and effective area denial tool that only uses up 4 ammo, thanks to the Tier 4 mod. Tier 3 and 5 have been chosen to maximize the slowdown and effect duration. This means that your direct shots will be slowing targets even more in tandem with the large puddle that will stay on the floor for a long time, giving you ample time to react to threats and making swarmers a joke. As accompaniment, I've chosen the EPC again, utilizing a build that synergizes well with large numbers of bugs being trapped and slowed in the same place. This one is using the persistent plasma overclock, which causes the charge shots to do less damage on impact, but leaves a damaging field of plasma behind. I originally didn't use this overclock much, but it seems to be made for Disperser compound goo puddles. It speeds up the damage in a localized place, preferably with the highest concentration of bugs. The mods 2-1-2-2-2 are primarily chosen to give you the most battery life and to make charge shots a bit easier to use mid-combat. The reason we aren't going for damage on the charge shot is because we are using Thin Containment Field in Tier 5, the mod famous for EPC mining. A man with a green hat once told me in a dream that the damage of the TCF implosion is not affected by mods and overclocks, which means that it can be an effective.
Did you see it?
Legend says that the GreenHatMan resides in the upper floors of the space rig. He is said to visit dwarves in their dreams to give them build advice. What do you think? Is the GreenHatMan real, or is he just a myth that resulted from too many Blacklock loggers? You decide. Wait, that's the wrong type of video, sorry. The damage of the TCF implosion is not affected by mods and overclocks, which means that it can be an effective combat tool, especially when you don't use any damage mods on the secondary. That means that both battery size increasing mods are fine to use, but if you feel like changing either for more damage, go for it. It's your gun after all. The two weapons in this loadout harmonize very satisfyingly, using the Disperser compound to cover a room with goo, with one or two well-placed charge shots, and then using your EPC implosions to deal huge damage to the immobilized targets, with an additional plasma field to leave behind for even more. The nice thing is that even if you whiff the TCF implosion, you can still get the value of the explosion and the plasma field, so it's a safe bet to fire at the good bugs either way. What I like to do is focus on slowing the biggest threats after covering the battlefield in puddles. You're effectively dealing damage to every approaching enemy either way as long as you put the puddles in the right spot. You have less than single target damage, so to balance things out I would suggest you bring axes to deal with pressing threats quickly. The ability to affect the entire swarm is a good trade-off since you'll be removing smaller threats without having to focus on them, so you can focus fire with your team on things that make it out of the goo-covered hellscape you create in their way. This is another build that thrives in defensive scenarios, but is a bit more adaptable than the Goobomber special build. This means it can be brought on much more mobile missions like mining, point extraction, and egg hunts. Choke points are great when you cover them in puddles, and you can even make a stand in the center of a large room by fighting within the puddles as well. Try it out. Our last build is surprisingly one of the best Dreadnought killer builds I've ever used. I'm using the mods 11223 with the Sludge Blast Overclock. I like to call it the S.H.A.R.T, which stands for Selective Heavy Armor Removal Tool, patent pending. Your charge shots fire like a shotgun, causing the charged glob to separate into fragments the moment it exits the nozzle, with each fragment dealing damage individually. Since it reduces the weapon's charge and reload speed, as well as reducing the tank capacity, the mods I've chosen seek to lower those downsides while maintaining consistency. For tier 2 I'm using the dice nozzle to increase the damage of the individual fragments. Atomizer nozzle does the exact equivalent damage by increasing the number of fragments at a lower damage, but I feel that fewer shots is more consistent in a close range. In tier 5 I have equipped Ingredient X for dissolving the armor of protected bugs faster. This not only helps your team with normal armored enemies, but has an especially potent effect on the twin dreadnoughts since their armor regenerates multiple times in a fight. The EPC I've chosen here is interchangeable depending on what you want to do with it. I've gone for a balanced build with 12323 and the magnetic cooling unit overclock. This config allows for respectable single shot damage and a good number of shots before an overheat. This will let you keep persistent fire on anything that attacks you between dreadnought encounters, as well as using it during fights for longer range hits. There's nothing crazy about the mods here, they simply do more damage at higher velocity, increase the battery size, reduce the overheat time and heat buildup, as well as ignite anything you hit enough times. You can go for thin containment field instead on tier 5 if that's more your speed, but that's all up to personal choice again. Using this overclock on the CSP at first seems a bit overkill to brings because of the high cost charge shots and how over the top the damage is on normal enemies, even Praetorians. And you'd be right, it does great damage, but it's far more expensive to use than the Volatile Impacts Mixture overclock, which can get a similar job done much more efficiently. What this overclock excels at is dealing damage to heavily armored enemies since it doesn't matter what part of the bug you're shooting. Oppressors absolutely melt from consistent frontal charge shots even if their armor can't be destroyed, which can save you and your team when you're cornered by one in a tough spot. But the biggest thing this overclock is effective on is dreadnoughts. Being able to hit them from any angle allows for a ton of freedom during these fights. With the regular dreadnought variant, you'll be able to damage it effectively even while it chases you with its abdomen completely pointed away. Hive guards are easier for the same reason too. The twins will be harder to hit, but will have their armor melted off quickly, assisting you and your team in DPS by removing the damage reduction of their armor right away. The EPC will help clear out trash enemies as well as make up for the fact that you'll be running out of ammo on your primary using the charge shots as often as you can. Also, remember you can still use single shots on the CSP. They still have damage and slowdown, so the utility will still be there for typical encounters. Use this build effectively, and the next time your team asks, "Who S.H.A.R.Ted?" you can raise your head high and say, "That was me." It took me quite a few iterations, test missions, and near catastrophic close-range tank depressurizations to have builds that felt right, but I'm pretty happy with how these feel now. The corrosive sludge pump is a weapon that can be brought into many different scenarios without feeling like it's lacking. The crowd control combined with the damage is always going to be an asset for you and your team, so if you like the feel of the weapon, try bringing it. The only thing it really seems to struggle with is aerial enemies, and even in that situation, you can use the 2nd and 5th builds I've shown here for pretty good effect anyway. Not only is the sludge pump fun and effective to use, but maintenance would be extremely grateful if you'd help them with the backed up rig sewage, so long as you don't tell anyone where you're getting those canisters from. I stream at twitch.tv/Searven, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. I'd love to talk with you about builds or whatever there. Also, I'd like to thank my patrons and everyone else who supports me on my Twitch or elsewhere. More specifically, I'd like to thank the Flannel Man, I Like Turtles, and Infraray. I couldn't do it without you guys. The next few videos will be covering other weapons, with the Lock one coming up next. I'll see you back here soon, so until next time, rock and stone.
Of course. They buy a bunch of aftermarket AI cores and don't even bother to include installation instructions. I should have never agreed to help assemble these things. Is this thing even working?
Error. I seem to be not properly installed on the ROV. Please read the included installation instructions for details.
Oh yeah, it's working. Can I just bypass the warning? Oh, okay. There we go.
Default installation parameter check bypassed. Installation complete. Is this configuration satisfactory? Please confirm.
Confirm?
Configuration confirmed. Hello, I'm Lookie, your biological survey drone assistant. Will we begin our research soon? I'm very excited to be of assistance.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that.